Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon is not merely a novel. It is a sprawling, labyrinthine journey into the heart of post-World War II paranoia, a literary supernova that redefined what a novel could be. Published in 1973, it immediately seized the literary world's attention, winning the National Book Award and being famously denied the Pulitzer Prize for its perceived obscenity and unreadability, a controversy that only cemented its place as a quintessential counter-cultural text. At its core, the book grapples with the terrifying implications of technology, power, and control in an increasingly fragmented world, specifically focusing on the V-2 rocket attacks on London during the final days of the war. Pynchon masterfully weaves together a vast tapestry of characters, settings, and historical details, blurring the lines between reality and hallucination, science and mysticism, humor and profound despair. It's a book that demands active participation from its reader, offering no easy answers, only a dizzying array of interconnected symbols, recurring motifs, and tantalizing clues that hint at a vast, underlying conspiracy. The novel's significance lies not only in its innovative narrative structure and encyclopedic scope, but also in its prescient exploration of themes that resonate more strongly than ever today. The pervasive influence of corporate and governmental power, the dehumanizing effects of advanced technology, and the struggle for individual freedom in a world seemingly hurtling towards its own destruction. Prepare to be immersed in a world where coincidences are never accidental, where every action has unseen consequences, and where the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling. The air raids of World War II, specifically the relentless, indiscriminate V-2 rocket attacks on London, form the terrifying backdrop against which Gravity's Rainbow first unfurls its dense, multi-layered narrative. Pynchon immediately plunges us into a world teetering on the brink of psychological collapse, a London scarred by constant bombardment, where the psychological toll of these unseen, silent weapons is as devastating as their physical impact. The opening scene, a nightmarish evacuation sequence, establishes the novel's disorienting atmosphere, a sense of perpetual anxiety and the creeping suspicion that something far more sinister than mere warfare is at play. We are introduced to Tyrone Slothrop, an American lieutenant in the Allied Psychological Warfare Division, a character around whom much of the narrative will eventually revolve, though initially, his significance is shrouded in the same fog of war that obscures London. Slothrop is a man plagued by peculiar coincidences, a series of seemingly random sexual encounters in London that predate the impact sites of V-2 rockets. This bizarre correlation, the uncanny synchronicity between his sexual liaisons and the rocket falls, becomes the central enigma, a scientific and psychological anomaly that sets off alarm bells within the Allied intelligence apparatus. What begins as a humorous, almost absurd observation quickly devolves into a desperate, sprawling investigation, drawing in a motley crew of intelligence officers, scientists, and shadowy figures from various Allied and Axis agencies. all attempting to decipher the meaning behind Slothrop's inexplicable connection to the V2s. The initial investigation into Slothrop's phenomenon is conducted by the White Visitation, a fictionalized Allied psychological operations unit based in an old manor outside London. This unit, a microcosm of the larger bureaucratic and scientific machinery of war, is populated by an eccentric cast of characters, each with their own obsessions and theories. There's Pointsman, a behaviorist obsessed with Pavlovian conditioning, and the notion that Slothrop's body is somehow being conditioned by the rockets, or perhaps even conditioning them in return. His rival, Mexico, a statistician and melancholic gambler, believes in the inherent randomness of the universe and resists Pointsman's attempts to impose order and predictability on Slothrop's bizarre experiences. Their intellectual sparring, often framed in a language dense with scientific jargon and philosophical musings, highlights one of the novel's central thematic tensions: the conflict between determinism and free will, between the human desire to find patterns and meaning in chaos, and the chilling possibility that no such meaning exists. The very nature of the V2 rocket itself, a weapon of pure, unguided destruction, becomes a potent symbol in this debate. It embodies the ultimate expression of technological determinism, a force unleashed upon the world with no moral compass, no human touch, only the cold logic of trajectory and impact. Slothrop, in his perplexing connection to this weapon, becomes a human cipher, a living Rorschach test onto which various scientific and ideological theories are projected, each attempting to rationalize the irrational, to impose a narrative on what might simply be cosmic chance. As the narrative progresses, Pynchon constantly shifts perspectives, time frames, and geographical locations, often without warning, creating a disorienting but ultimately immersive reading experience. We are introduced to a vast array of minor characters, some appearing for only a few pages, others recurring throughout the novel, each adding another layer to the intricate web of espionage, scientific research, and existential dread. These characters, ranging from British intelligence officers and German rocket scientists to drug dealers, film producers, and even a sentient light bulb, contribute to the novel's encyclopedic scope and its sense of a world interconnected by unseen forces. The humor, often dark and satirical, provides a much-needed counterpoint to the underlying seriousness of the themes, preventing the narrative from becoming solely a bleak exploration of human suffering. Pynchon's prose is a dazzling display of linguistic virtuosity, a polyphonic blend of scientific jargon, historical detail, popular culture references, and lyrical passages that often read like poetry. This stylistic eclecticism mirrors the chaotic and multifaceted nature of the world he depicts, a world fractured by war and fragmented by competing ideologies. The reader is constantly challenged to piece together clues, to discern patterns amidst the apparent randomness, a task that mirrors the characters' own desperate attempts to make sense of their increasingly nonsensical reality. The early sections of the novel also begin to introduce the concept of the firm, a shadowy, pervasive entity that seems to operate behind the scenes of the war, pulling strings and manipulating events for its own enigmatic purposes. This amorphous organization, hinted at through a network of interlocking corporations, governmental agencies, and secret societies, represents the insidious nature of power and control in the modern world. The V-2 rocket, rather than being merely a weapon of war, begins to take on symbolic significance as the ultimate product of this firm, a technological marvel that transcends national boundaries and serves a deeper, more sinister agenda. Slothrop's inexplicable connection to the rockets begins to suggest that he is not merely an unfortunate victim of coincidence, but perhaps a pawn in a much larger game. His personal history, intertwined with the very development and deployment of these devastating machines. This growing suspicion transforms the initial scientific investigation into a full-blown conspiracy thriller, albeit one where the lines between truth and paranoia are constantly blurred. The search for answers about Slothrop's phenomenon becomes a descent into a rabbit hole of interconnected narratives, each revealing another piece of the puzzle, yet simultaneously deepening the mystery. The novel's initial focus on the psychological impact of the V2s gradually expands to encompass the global implications of technological advancement, the seductive power of control, and the chilling realization that humanity may be unwittingly building the instruments of its own destruction. As Slothrop's case continues to baffle the white visitation, the stakes escalate. The bizarre correlation between his orgasms and rocket strikes is no longer a mere curiosity, but a potential key to understanding the deeper forces at work. Is Slothrop a victim of a perverse conditioning experiment? Is his body somehow acting as a predictive mechanism? Or is there something even more profound and unsettling at play? Something that challenges the very notions of cause and effect, free will and predestination. These questions propel the narrative forward, drawing Slothrop further into the vortex of military intelligence, scientific speculation, and the burgeoning paranoia that permeates the post-war landscape. The search for a definitive answer about Slothrop takes on an almost spiritual dimension, becoming a quest not just for scientific understanding, but for a glimpse behind the veil of reality, to uncover the hidden mechanisms that govern human existence. The novel's early pages, therefore, lay the groundwork for a sprawling, multifaceted narrative that transcends the conventional boundaries of genre, blending elements of historical fiction, science fiction, espionage thriller, and philosophical inquiry. The constant threat of the V2, the silent, invisible harbinger of death, serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of human life and the overwhelming power of the forces that shape our destiny, forcing both the characters and the reader to confront the terrifying implications of a world where technology has outpaced morality, and where the lines between human agency and mechanical determinism have become dangerously blurred. The relentless, unexplained pattern connected to Slothrop suggests a hidden order, a sinister design, driving the very chaos of war. This sets the stage for a journey into the heart of the 20th century's technological nightmares, a journey from which neither Slothrop nor the reader will emerge unchanged. The initial perplexing mystery surrounding Tyrone Slothrop's sexual encounters and the V2 rocket impact sites quickly propels him beyond the confines of the white visitation's observational scrutiny. and into a far more dangerous and expansive playing field. As the war winds down and the Allied forces push deeper into Europe, the focus shifts from simply understanding Slothrop's bizarre correlation to actively pursuing him, initially under the guise of continued psychological observation, but increasingly with more clandestine and ominous motives. The underlying suspicion grows that Slothrop is not just an anomalous case study, but a crucial piece of a much larger global puzzle, a living link in a chain of technological and societal control. His handlers, particularly the determined and morally ambiguous pointsman, view him less as a human being and more as a research subject, a conditioned animal whose behavior can be meticulously analyzed and perhaps even manipulated. This dehumanizing gaze is a pervasive theme, as many characters in the novel are reduced to their functions within vast, impersonal systems, whether military, scientific, or corporate. Slothrop himself, despite his often comical and seemingly carefree demeanor, is increasingly aware of being watched, analyzed, and even pursued, leading to a growing paranoia that mirrors the pervasive atmosphere of suspicion and conspiracy that defines the narrative. As the war in Europe draws to a close, a new and equally chaotic landscape emerges: the Zone. This refers to the occupied territories of Germany and Eastern Europe, a vast, lawless expanse where national allegiances are fluid, black markets thrive, and the vestiges of the Third Reich still linger, alongside the nascent structures of the Allied occupation. It is into this anarchic environment that Slothrop is dispatched, ostensibly on intelligence-gathering missions, but in reality, to continue monitoring his strange connection to the rockets. The Zone becomes a crucible for Pynchon's exploration of power vacuums, the moral ambiguities of victory, and the seductive allure of scientific and technological plunder. German scientists, particularly those involved in the V2 program, become highly prized assets, sought after by both the Western Allies and the burgeoning Soviet bloc. This brain drain of scientific talent, a historical reality of the post-war period, is exaggerated and distorted in Pynchon's narrative to highlight the cynical, amoral pursuit of technological dominance above all else. Slothrop's journey through the Zone is less a coherent mission and more a series of fragmented encounters, digressions, and hallucinatory episodes, reflecting the fractured reality of post-war Europe and the disintegration of his own sense of self. He encounters a dizzying array of characters, each with their own agendas, secrets, and connection to the overarching mystery of the V2. Among these encounters are the German rocket engineers themselves, particularly characters like Franz Perkler, a brilliant but ethically compromised scientist who worked on the V2 program, and his estranged daughter, Ilse. Through Perkler's flashbacks and his troubled reflections, Pynchon delves into the moral compromises inherent in scientific progress, particularly when it serves destructive ends. Perkler's relationship with the rocket, his devotion to its engineering perfection, often overshadows his recognition of its devastating purpose, a stark illustration of how compartmentalization and intellectual detachment can enable horrific acts. The V2, in this context, is no longer just a weapon. It is a meticulously crafted object of beauty and terror, a testament to human ingenuity twisted to serve the ends of mass destruction. Perkler's narrative thread also introduces the idea of the Schwarzgerät, or black device, a mysterious and perhaps mythical component of the V2 that is said to be the key to its ultimate power and the object of intense pursuit by various factions. This elusive device, imbued with almost mystical significance, becomes a potent symbol of the hidden knowledge and ultimate control that everyone in the zone seems to be seeking. It is a MacGuffin, a catalyst for much of the plot, but also a deeper metaphor for the ultimate secrets of existence that remain forever just out of reach. Slothrop's journey through the zone is characterized by a gradual unmooring from conventional reality. The constant shifts in time, the blurring of historical fact with fictional embellishment, and the pervasive sense of paranoia contribute to a hallucinatory atmosphere, where it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is a product of Slothrop's own deteriorating mental state or the manipulations of unseen forces. He adopts various disguises, sheds identities, and seems to exist in a liminal space, constantly on the run, both from those who pursue him and from the encroaching madness. This physical and psychological disintegration is mirrored by the chaotic landscape of the zone itself, a territory without clear borders or defined allegiances, where the past and present collide, and the remnants of the Nazi regime mingle with the emerging powers of the Cold War. Pynchon employs a mosaic-like narrative structure, interweaving Slothrop's fragmented experiences with the detailed backstories of other characters, historical digressions, scientific explanations, and philosophical musings. This deliberate fragmentation reflects the novel's broader theme of entropy, the tendency of systems to break down into disorder, and the human struggle to find coherence in a world that is increasingly chaotic and meaningless. The pursuit of the Schwarzgerät and the ongoing investigation into Slothrop's phenomenon become increasingly intertwined with the larger geopolitical struggle for post-war dominance. The various intelligence agencies, British, American, Russian, and even the remnants of the German intelligence apparatus, are not merely competing for military secrets, but for control over the very fabric of the future. The V2 rocket, as the apotheosis of technological advancement, represents this future, a future where power resides not in traditional armies, but in the mastery of advanced weaponry and the scientific knowledge that produces it. Slothrop, in his enigmatic connection to this ultimate weapon, becomes a pawn in this grand game, his individual fate dwarfed by the immense forces at play. His bizarre sexual past, initially the focus of scientific inquiry, begins to hint at a deeper, more disturbing origin, a suggestion that his connection to the rocket might be not just coincidental, but engineered, perhaps even from birth. This chilling possibility raises questions about the nature of identity, free will, and the extent to which human beings can be manipulated and controlled by unseen masters. As Slothrop delves deeper into the zone, he encounters characters who further illuminate the novel's themes of control and manipulation. There are the seers, individuals who possess a unique ability to perceive the hidden patterns and connections that others miss, hinting at a reality beyond the ordinary. There are also the various firms and corporations, both real and fictional, that are shown to have benefited immensely from the war, profiting from destruction, and poised to exert even greater influence in the post-war world. These entities, with their vast networks of resources and their opaque motives, embody the pervasive, almost invisible nature of modern power. Slothrop's encounters are often surreal, infused with elements of the fantastical and the absurd, further blurring the lines between reality and dream. The narrative pulsates with a manic energy, shifting from moments of profound insight to slapstick comedy, from terrifying paranoia to lyrical beauty. This stylistic fluidity is a deliberate choice, mirroring the chaotic and unpredictable nature of the world Pynchon depicts, a world where the only constant is change, and where the pursuit of meaning often leads only to further disorientation. Slothrop's increasing alienation and psychological deterioration are central to this part of the narrative, as he finds himself increasingly isolated, unable to trust anyone, and haunted by the specter of the V2, which seems to follow him like a personal curse, a physical manifestation of the invisible forces that are slowly but surely closing in on him. His journey through the zone is not merely a physical one, but a descent into the heart of his own fragmented identity, as he grapples with the terrifying possibility that his very existence is inextricably linked to the trajectory of a rocket, a predetermined path from which there may be no escape. As Slothrop's erratic trajectory through the zone continues, the narrative delves deeper into the sinister origins of the V2 rocket and the shadowy figures who shaped its development. Central to this unfolding mystery is the character of Weissman, also known by his SS codename, Captain Bleisrow. Bleisrow is a figure of chilling sadism and a profound, nihilistic worldview. A former colonial officer in German South-West Africa, whose experiences there warped his understanding of human life and power. His past is intrinsically linked to the hero people, a tribe subjected to genocide by the German colonial forces, and specifically to Enzian, a hero boy who becomes his lover, and later, a leader of the Schwarzkommando, a group of black hero rocket technicians operating secretly in the zone. The complex, often disturbing, relationship between Bleisrow and Enzian, steeped in themes of dominance, submission, and a twisted form of love, highlights the novel's pervasive exploration of power dynamics, both personal and geopolitical. Bleisrow sees the V2 not merely as a weapon, but as a mystical conduit, a means of transcending the limitations of the earthly realm, a trajectory into a spiritual void, embodying a profound death drive that permeates much of the latter half of the war. Bleisrow's narrative is further complicated by his perverse relationship with Catch Borgesius, a Dutch double agent who has been intimately involved with him, and a young German boy named Gottfried. This macabre trio forms a sadomasochistic household in wartime Holland, where Bleisrow orchestrates grotesque rituals of control and degradation. Gottfried, in particular, becomes a sacrificial lamb in Bleisrow's deranged vision, groomed to be the ultimate payload for the final V2 rocket, Rocket 00000. This planned sacrifice is a horrifying manifestation of Bleisrow's ultimate desire for a transcendence through destruction, an offering to the void that the rocket represents. The detailed, unsettling descriptions of their interactions reveal the dark underbelly of human nature and the ways in which power can corrupt and dehumanize. Catch, caught between her mission as a spy and her entanglement with Bleisrow, represents the moral compromises forced upon individuals caught within the machinery of war, and the psychological scars left by such experiences. Her story also intertwines with Slothrop's, as she is another of the women on his map of sexual encounters, suggesting a deeper, more orchestrated connection than mere chance. The elusive Schwarzgerät, the black device or black instrument, takes on increasing importance as Slothrop continues his quest. It is rumored to be a crucial component of Rocket 00000, perhaps a guidance system, a special insulation, or even a living payload. The Schwarzgerät, made of a fantastical plastic called Imipolex G, becomes a powerful symbol of the convergence of technology, desire, and control. Imipolex G, with its unusual properties, is connected to Slothrop's own past, hinting at a childhood experiment by the Pavlovian scientist Laszlo Jamf, who may have conditioned Slothrop with a strong, perhaps even sexual, attraction to the material. This revelation suggests that Slothrop's entire life, his very desires, might have been pre-programmed, manipulated from an early age, thereby undermining his sense of free will and personal agency. The pursuit of the Schwarzgerät by various factions, the Schwarzkommando seeking to launch their own rocket, Allied intelligence trying to prevent it, and other shadowy groups with their own inscrutable agendas, transforms the narrative into a frenzied chase, a race against time to uncover the ultimate secret of the V2. The Schwarzkommando, led by Enzian, forms a central, sympathetic counterpoint to the nihilistic forces of Bleisrow. These exiled heroes, driven by a profound sense of historical grievance and a desire to reclaim agency, seek to construct and launch their own V2 rocket, Rocket 00001. For them, the rocket is not a tool of destruction in Bleisrow's vein, but a sacred text, a symbol of their survival, a means of communicating with their ancestors, and perhaps even reversing the trajectory of their historical oppression. Their quest is infused with a desperate hope for redemption and a spiritual understanding of the rocket, contrasting sharply with the purely technological and destructive interpretations of the European powers. Enzian's struggle to lead his fragmented people, to find meaning and purpose in the face of immense historical trauma, reflects the broader human search for identity and belonging in a post-war world stripped of traditional certainties. Their nomadic journey through the zone, piecing together fragments of rockets and their own shattered pasts, becomes a powerful metaphor for the attempt to reconstruct meaning from the debris of war. Pynchon continues to elaborate on the theme of preterition, the theological concept of being passed over for divine grace, or simply being forgotten or overlooked by those in power. Many characters in Gravity's Rainbow fall into this category. The victims of war, the marginalized, the forgotten, the ones whose stories are not deemed important enough to be recorded in official histories. Slothrop, as he becomes increasingly disoriented and loses his sense of self, seems to drift into this state of preterition. His identity dissolving amidst the chaos of the zone. The novel suggests that while the elect are those chosen by the powerful, the preterite, in their very forgottenness, might possess a unique kind of freedom, an ability to evade the pervasive systems of control. However, this freedom comes at a cost, often leading to profound loneliness and a sense of existential drift. The concept of preterition is not just a theological metaphor. It also reflects the novel's critique of history, which often glorifies the powerful and overlooks the suffering of the nameless masses. The influence of the rocket cartel becomes increasingly apparent, revealing a transnational network of industrialists, scientists, and military figures who profit from war and technological advancement, transcending national boundaries and ideological divides. This cartel represents a terrifying vision of a world where technological progress is driven not by human betterment, but by profit and the insatiable desire for control. The V2, then, is not merely a German weapon. It is a product of this global corporate entity, a symbol of a universal system of power that orchestrates events for its own benefit. This network is a precursor to the military-industrial complex, a concept that would become prominent in the post-war era. Slothrop's deepening paranoia is not simply a mental illness, but a rational response to the very real and pervasive conspiracy that seems to be manipulating events on a global scale. The novel challenges the reader to question the official narratives of history, to look beyond the surface of events and discern the hidden forces at play. Forces that operate with an almost inhuman logic, detached from conventional morality. The zone itself, with its constantly shifting borders, its blend of desperate survival and bizarre revelry, becomes a character in its own right, a physical manifestation of entropy and the breakdown of order. Slothrop's encounters become more surreal, his grasp on reality more tenuous. He finds himself embroiled in absurd schemes, interacting with figures who embody various archetypes of post-war chaos: black marketeers, dispossessed refugees, rogue intelligence agents, and strange occultists. These encounters, often infused with Pynchon's characteristic dark humor, further emphasize the novel's exploration of the human condition in extreme circumstances, where the boundaries of sanity and convention are constantly tested. The third part of Gravity's Rainbow accelerates the narrative's descent into a psychedelic, conspiratorial nightmare, where the answers Slothrop seeks only lead to more questions, and where the line between his personal history and the grand sweep of global power becomes increasingly blurred, suggesting that his very existence is a function of the same forces that drive the rockets, an intricately designed component in a vast, terrifying machine. The ultimate horror for Slothrop is the realization that his own identity may be nothing more than a carefully constructed delusion, a conditioned response to a world built on control and destruction, a world where the trajectory of the V2 is also the trajectory of his own predetermined fate. As Slothrop's increasingly frantic peregrinations through the shattered landscape of the zone continue, the focus of the narrative widens to encompass the elaborate and often absurd network of intelligence agencies, counteragencies, and fringe groups that populate post-war Europe, all entangled in the pervasive conspiracy surrounding the V2 rocket. Pynchon introduces us to a bewildering array of characters, each with their own peculiar motivations and roles in this grand, often farcical, drama of espionage and technological acquisition. Among them are the shadowy figures of the Byzantine Committee, an international intelligence cabal seemingly operating above and beyond any national allegiances, whose cryptic pronouncements and opaque objectives only serve to deepen the sense of paranoia that saturates the novel. These entities embody the very essence of the deep state, a clandestine power structure that manipulates events from behind the scenes, blurring the lines between corporate interests, military objectives, and scientific advancement. Their pursuit of the V2, or more specifically, the elusive Schwarzgerät, transcends mere military advantage. It is a quest for ultimate control, for the very secrets that govern the trajectory of power in the dawning age of technological warfare. Slothrop, perpetually on the run, assumes a multitude of disguises and identities, becoming a kind of protean figure, an embodiment of the era's inherent instability and the constant struggle to evade identification and control. He is, at various points, a pig-masked hero named Der Springer, a British officer, a German soldier, a rock and roll musician, and a jazz pianist. These transformations are not merely whimsical. They reflect his desperate attempt to escape the invisible nets being cast for him, the relentless scrutiny of those who believe his personal history holds the key to the rocket's ultimate secret. Each new persona offers a momentary respite, a brief illusion of freedom, before the underlying pattern reasserts itself, and the sense of being a pawn in a larger game re-emerges. This continuous metamorphosis underscores the novel's thematic exploration of identity in a world where individuality is threatened by systems of mass organization and technological control. Slothrop's fragmentation mirrors the fragmentation of post-war Europe itself, a continent shattered into competing zones and ideological blocks, where old certainties have crumbled and new, unsettling paradigms are taking shape. The novel also continues to weave in the historical and scientific context of rocketry, delving into the esoteric theories and quasi-mystical beliefs held by some of the German rocket scientists. Figures like Walter Rathenau, a historical German industrialist and politician, are resurrected and imbued with a symbolic significance that transcends their historical roles. Rathenau, a proponent of industrial organization and rationalization, becomes a stand-in for the forces of corporate control and the dehumanizing aspects of technological progress. Pynchon hints at a darker, more occult dimension to the development of the V2, suggesting that its creation was not merely a feat of engineering, but also a manifestation of deeper, more sinister desires for transcendence and absolute power. The rocket itself is often described in almost spiritual terms, a text to be deciphered, a modern-day Gnostic symbol promising either salvation or damnation, depending on its interpretation. This blending of scientific detail with mystical speculation creates a unique narrative tapestry, where the concrete realities of war are imbued with a profound, almost cosmic, significance. The theme of Pavlovian conditioning, introduced early with Pointsman's theories about Slothrop, becomes increasingly prominent and disturbing. the lingering presence of Dr. Laszlo Jamf, the mysterious behaviorist who may have conditioned Slothrop in infancy with a sexual attraction to Imipolex G, represents the ultimate horror of external control. If Slothrop's desires, his very capacity for pleasure, were engineered by a scientist, then what does that say about free will? The novel suggests that the war itself was a massive conditioning experiment, a means by which the powerful could shape human behavior on a grand scale, reducing individuals to predictable responses. This theme resonates with the broader societal anxieties of the mid-20th century, particularly the rise of behaviorism and the growing understanding of propaganda's power. Slothrop's struggle to understand the origins of his own impulses becomes a metaphorical battle for his very soul, a desperate attempt to reclaim agency in a world determined to define and control him. His encounters with various controllers, from pointsmen to the more overtly sinister figures of the Byzantine Committee, reinforce the idea that he is constantly under observation, his every move scrutinized, his every reaction analyzed for patterns that might unlock the secrets of the rocket. Beyond the specific machinations of intelligence agencies, Pynchon expands on the idea of a pervasive, almost sentient system that orchestrates events across the globe. This system is not necessarily monolithic. It is a decentralized, adaptive entity made up of interlocking corporations, governmental bureaucracies, scientific institutions, and even individual desires for power and control. It is a force of entropy, constantly seeking to reduce the world to predictable data points, to eliminate randomness, and to impose an ultimate order. The V-2 rocket, in its predetermined trajectory and its cold, impersonal delivery of destruction, becomes the ultimate symbol of this system's desire for control. Slothrop's journey, in many ways, is a futile attempt to escape this system, to find a crack in its impenetrable facade, to reclaim a space of genuine freedom and unpredictability. But the more he struggles, the more deeply he seems to become enmeshed within its intricate web. The novel suggests that even resistance can be co-opted, that the system is so vast and adaptable that it can absorb and neutralize any challenge to its authority. The narrative also continues to explore the idea of double agents and the inherent ambiguities of wartime allegiance. Characters like Catch Borgesius, caught between multiple loyalties, embody the moral complexities of a world where betrayal is commonplace and trust is a luxury. Their personal struggles reflect the larger breakdown of traditional structures and values in the aftermath of a devastating global conflict. The very concept of sides in the war becomes increasingly irrelevant as the true players are revealed to be not nations, but powerful organizations and individuals driven by their own agendas, manipulating nations and their populations for their own gain. The humor in these sections, often dark and absurd, serves as a coping mechanism, a way to process the overwhelming horror and meaninglessness of the events unfolding. Pynchon uses song lyrics, slapstick routines, and elaborate satirical set pieces to deflate the seriousness of the underlying themes, while simultaneously highlighting the absurdity of the human condition in the face of such overwhelming forces. This juxtaposition of humor and existential dread creates a uniquely Pynchonian tone, engaging the reader on multiple levels. Slothrop's increasing psychological dissolution is a central thread throughout this part of the narrative. His encounters become more bizarre, his grasp on reality more tenuous, and his memories more fragmented. He begins to lose the ability to differentiate between his past and present, between his dreams and his waking life. This personal entropy mirrors the broader societal entropy, the breakdown of order and meaning in the post-war world. His quest for answers about his connection to the V2 becomes less about scientific understanding and more about a desperate search for his own lost identity. He is a man being erased, not just by external forces, but by the sheer weight of the conspiracy he has stumbled into. The possibility that he is not a unique individual, but rather a designed product of a secret experiment, a living trajectory of programmed desires, is a terrifying realization that slowly dawns upon him. This descent into fragmentation, into the realm of the preterite, where one is passed over, forgotten, and ultimately erased from history, becomes the tragic arc of Slothrop's journey, a poignant reflection on the fate of the individual in an increasingly dehumanized and controlled world. He is a living, breathing paradox, the object of intense scrutiny, yet simultaneously dissolving into invisibility, a ghost haunting the ruins of the zone, forever tethered to the explosive legacy of Rocket 00000. As Slothrop's journey through the zone descends further into chaos and hallucinatory encounters, the novel shifts its focus to the intricate and often bizarre world of the Schwarzkommando, the secret society of hero rocket technicians, led by Enzian. Their story becomes a powerful counter-narrative to the dominant forces of European and American power, offering a glimpse into the perspectives of the preterite, those marginalized and overlooked by history. The Schwarzkommando are not merely a group of engineers. They are a community bonded by shared trauma, a desperate quest for autonomy, and a mystical connection to the very technology that has been used to oppress them. Their goal is to reassemble Rocket 00001 from discarded V2 components found scattered across the zone, a seemingly impossible task that takes on a ritualistic, almost spiritual significance. For the hero, the rocket is not simply a weapon of war, but a sacred text, a means of communication with their ancestors, a vessel for their collective memory and their hopes for redemption. This contrasts sharply with the purely destructive and utilitarian view of the rocket held by the Western powers. Enzian, as the leader of the Schwarzkommando, embodies the complex struggle for identity and purpose in the wake of historical genocide. His past entanglement with Captain Bleisrow, his former colonizer and perverse lover, adds a layer of profound psychological trauma to his leadership. He grapples with the legacy of his people's suffering, seeking to find a path forward that honors their past while asserting their future. The Schwarzkommando's mission to launch Rocket 00001 is thus a deeply symbolic act of defiance, a reclaiming of technology for their own ends, transforming an instrument of destruction into a potential tool of liberation. Their journey through the zone is characterized by a desperate scavenger hunt, collecting fragments of rockets from various impact sites, piecing them together like an archaeological puzzle. This process is not just mechanical, it is an act of collective remembrance. Each piece of the rocket holding a fragment of history, a memory of its destructive power, but also a potential for rebirth. The narrative also continues to explore the tantalizing mystery of the Schwarzschild, the black device, rumored to be the key component of rocket 00000. This elusive object takes on an almost mythical status, becoming the ultimate MacGuffin that drives much of the action. Its connection to Amipolex G, the fantastical plastic with which Slothrop may have been conditioned, further blurs the lines between technology, desire, and human consciousness. The Schwarzschild is pursued by virtually every faction in the zone: the Schwarz Commando, various allied intelligence agencies, and shadowy corporate interests, each believing that its possession will grant them ultimate power or enlightenment. Pynchon imbues the Schwarzschild with a profound symbolic weight, representing the ultimate secrets of the universe, the hidden knowledge that could unlock the forces of creation or destruction. Its elusiveness suggests that some truths may be inherently unknowable, perpetually just out of reach, or perhaps too terrifying to fully comprehend. Pynchon's satirical portrayal of bureaucracy and the inherent absurdities of intelligence operations becomes increasingly sharp in these sections. The sheer number of overlapping and competing agencies, their internal rivalries, their reliance on arcane procedures and incomprehensible jargon, all contribute to a sense of profound inefficiency and pointless complexity. The intelligence officers, often portrayed as bumbling or overly theoretical, are more concerned with maintaining their own power and prestige than with genuinely understanding the mysteries they are meant to solve. This bureaucratic labyrinth reflects the novel's broader critique of modern institutions, which, despite their claims of rationality and control, often produce only chaos and confusion. The war itself, in this light, appears less as a clear-cut conflict between good and evil, and more as a vast, self-perpetuating system driven by its own internal logic, consuming lives and resources for no discernible higher purpose. Slothrop's gradual dispersion, or scattering, becomes a central motif. As he continues to lose his sense of self, his identity fragments, and he seems to dissolve into the very landscape of the zone. This is represented through his increasingly bizarre encounters, his ability to adopt new personas with ease, and the fading clarity of his memories. He becomes less of a character and more of a conduit, a receptor for the vast, interconnected network of forces and narratives that crisscross the novel. This dispersion can be interpreted in multiple ways as a tragic consequence of his entanglement with the system, a complete loss of his individual agency, or, paradoxically, as a form of liberation, a shedding of the false self imposed upon him by his conditioning and the expectations of others. By dissolving into the collective unconscious of the zone, he might achieve a different kind of freedom, an escape from the relentless scrutiny and control that has plagued him. The narrative also delves further into the concept of pre-war and post-war states of consciousness, suggesting that the war fundamentally altered the human psyche, creating new forms of paranoia, anxiety, and a craving for order. The characters are constantly trying to make sense of a world that no longer adheres to familiar rules, where the scientific certainties of the past have given way to the terrifying uncertainties of nuclear physics, and the looming threat of mass destruction. The V-2 rocket, with its invisible trajectory and sudden, devastating impact, becomes a powerful metaphor for this new, unseen enemy, a force that cannot be reasoned with or predicted. The shift in warfare from visible armies to invisible weapons is a key theme, reflecting a deeper shift in the nature of power itself, from overt display to covert manipulation. The climax of the Schwarzkommando's narrative arc involves their desperate, almost spiritual attempt to launch Rocket 00001. Their efforts are fraught with mechanical difficulties, internal divisions, and external interference from those who seek to thwart their mission. The scene of the launch itself is imbued with a sense of both profound hope and tragic futility, highlighting the precariousness of their endeavor and the overwhelming odds they face against a world determined to keep them marginalized. Their rocket, unlike Bleisrow's ultimate destructive launch, is intended as a message, a cry for recognition, a defiant assertion of their existence in a world that seeks to erase them. This contrast underscores one of the novel's central questions: can technology be redeemed? Or is it inherently bound to the forces of destruction and control? The Schwarzkommando's story offers a glimmer of hope, a suggestion that even in the face of overwhelming technological power, humanity can find ways to resist, to create meaning, and to assert its will against the forces of entropy. Their rocket, a symbol of both their pain and their resilience, arcs through the night sky, a fleeting testament to their enduring spirit in the vast, indifferent cosmos. Slothrop, in his own drifting, often seems to intersect with their narrative, drawn by the same currents of mystery and destiny that guide the rocket itself, forever searching for a connection to the very force that defines his strange, predetermined existence. As Slothrop's unraveling continues, his journey through the zone becomes increasingly divorced from conventional reality, transforming into a surreal pilgrimage through the psychic landscape of post-war Europe. The narrative frequently shifts focus, delving into the intricate subplots and interconnected lives of other characters, revealing how each is caught in the same vast, invisible net of power and control. One such pivotal storyline involves Pirate Prentice, a British intelligence officer with the unique ability to influence the weather through his dreams. Pirate, a seemingly benign figure, is nonetheless entangled in the machinations of the White Visitation and various other intelligence agencies. His dreams, which often bleed into reality, serve as a metaphorical landscape for the subconscious desires and anxieties that permeate the novel. His ability to control weather, a force of nature, underscores the novel's pervasive theme of control, not just over human beings, but over the very environment. Pirate's story also brings into focus the deep psychological scars left by the war, particularly the ways in which individuals attempt to cope with overwhelming trauma through escapism, fantasy, or the exertion of control over their immediate surroundings, no matter how small. Another crucial character who gains prominence is Jessica Swanlake, Pirate Prentice's former lover, whose life is interwoven with the grim realities of wartime London and the peculiar rituals of the White Visitation. Her relationship with Roger Mexico, the statistician who champions randomness against Pointsman's deterministic theories, becomes a tender, yet ultimately tragic, counterpoint to the novel's pervasive bleakness. Their love, born amidst the chaos of the V2 attacks, represents a fleeting moment of human connection and warmth in a world consumed by paranoia and destruction. However, even their personal lives are not immune to the pervasive influence of the system. Pointsman, obsessed with his behaviorist theories, subtly manipulates their relationship, viewing it as another data point in his grand experiment to understand and control human behavior. The eventual dissolution of their relationship, orchestrated by external forces, tragically illustrates how personal happiness and individual freedom are systematically undermined by the larger, impersonal structures of power. Their love story becomes a poignant symbol of the fragility of human connection in a world increasingly dominated by the cold logic of algorithms and control. The novel also deepens its exploration of the firms and the cartel, revealing a vast, interconnected network of corporate entities that operate with a chilling amorality. These corporations, often with German roots like IG Farben, a real-life chemical conglomerate infamous for its role in the Nazi war effort, are shown to have transcended national allegiances, collaborating across borders, and profiting immensely from the very war they ostensibly fought against. Their pursuit of technological advancement, particularly in rocketry and synthetic materials like Imipolex G, is driven solely by profit and the consolidation of power, regardless of the human cost. The V2 rocket, then, is not merely a weapon of destruction, but the ultimate product of this transnational corporate greed, a testament to the fact that money and power know no national boundaries. Pynchon's detailed descriptions of these corporate machinations serve as a searing critique of unchecked capitalism and its capacity to dehumanize and exploit. The cartel becomes a representation of the ultimate they, the invisible hand that pulls the strings of nations, orchestrating wars and manipulating populations for its own inscrutable ends, creating a profound sense of powerlessness among the individuals caught in its web. As Slothrop drifts further into the zone, his encounters become increasingly fragmented and symbolic. He interacts with a bizarre array of individuals, some of whom are clearly agents of the system, others victims, and still others who seem to exist in a liminal space between reality and hallucination. These interactions often take on the quality of a fever dream, filled with strange coincidences, unsettling revelations, and moments of absurd humor. Pynchon uses these episodic encounters to introduce new layers of historical context, scientific theory, and esoteric knowledge, further enriching the novel's already dense tapestry. The sheer volume of information, often presented without explicit explanation, forces the reader to actively engage in the process of deciphering meaning, mirroring Slothrop's own increasingly desperate attempts to make sense of his collapsing reality. The line between Slothrop's subjective experience and objective reality becomes increasingly blurred, suggesting that the truth is not a fixed entity, but a fluid, manipulable construct, subject to the whims of those in power. The concept of entropy, the tendency of systems to move from order to disorder, becomes a pervasive thematic undercurrent. Not only is the physical world of post-war Europe in a state of entropy, but so too are the human mind and society itself. Slothrop's personal disintegration is a direct manifestation of this entropic force, as his identity fragments and dissipates. The novel suggests that technology, particularly the V2 rocket, is a key driver of this entropy, accelerating the breakdown of traditional structures and moral certainties. The pursuit of ultimate control, paradoxically, leads to ultimate chaos, as the system's attempts to impose order ultimately result in greater disorder and unpredictability. This philosophical dimension elevates gravity's rainbow beyond a mere war story, transforming it into a profound meditation on the nature of existence, the limitations of human knowledge, and the ultimate futility of trying to impose absolute order on a fundamentally chaotic universe. The pervasive fear of nuclear annihilation, though not explicitly present in the wartime setting, looms as a powerful subtext, a future consequence of humanity's unchecked pursuit of destructive technology, a final, ultimate entropic event. The narrative also continues to explore the idea of preemption, the concept of striking first to prevent a perceived future threat. This theme is particularly relevant to the Cold War context that was emerging as the novel was written, with the arms race and the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. The V2, in its ability to strike silently and without warning, embodies this preemptive strike capability. The various intelligence agencies are constantly trying to preempt each other, to gain an advantage in the struggle for future dominance. This endless cycle of suspicion and anticipatory action creates a pervasive atmosphere of paranoia, where trust is impossible, and every action is interpreted as a potential threat. Slothrop, in his own strange way, becomes a focal point for this preemption, his future trajectory perhaps already mapped out by forces beyond his control, his actions merely fulfilling a predetermined script. The very idea that his orgasms predicted rocket strikes is the ultimate preemption, a chilling suggestion that even the most intimate human experiences are somehow intertwined with the trajectory of destructive power. A horrifying thought that he cannot shake, driving him deeper into the labyrinthine paranoia of the zone. As Slothrop's psychic landscape continues to fragment, he encounters a fascinating array of characters and situations that further illuminate the novel's core themes of control, paranoia, and the search for meaning in a chaotic world. One of the most significant encounters involves his connection to the world of film and popular culture. The novel frequently satirizes the ways in which mass media, particularly cinema, can be used as a tool for propaganda and psychological manipulation. Slothrop, in his increasingly blurred state of reality, even takes on the identity of a German film actor named Max Schlepsig, whose past is entangled with the very forces that seem to be controlling Slothrop's destiny. This connection between the rocket's trajectory and the celluloid strip of a film becomes a powerful metaphor for predetermined fate. Just as a film reel unwinds inexorably to its conclusion, so too does the rocket follow its predetermined path. And so too might Slothrop's life be merely a script written by unseen hands. The exploration of Slothrop's past deepens, particularly the chilling possibility that his conditioning by Laszlo Jamf was not a mere theoretical exercise, but a profound, life life-altering intervention, the elusive Imipolex G, the fantastical plastic to which Slothrop may have been conditioned to respond sexually, recurs as a potent symbol. Its properties, specifically its erectile nature, hardening in response to certain stimuli, are described in meticulous, almost fetishistic detail, further emphasizing the novel's grotesque humor and its blending of the scientific with the erotic. This material, which finds its way into the V2 rocket as a component, becomes a literal and metaphorical link between Slothrop's private desires and the vast, destructive machinery of war. The implication is terrifying, that Slothrop's very libido was designed, a Pavlovian response wired into his being to serve some unknown purpose related to the rocket. This radical idea of pre-programming the human psyche challenges the very notion of individual freedom and autonomy, suggesting that even our most intimate sensations might be manipulated by external forces, making Slothrop less a free agent and more a living instrument in a grand, sinister experiment. The narrative also dedicates significant attention to the concept of the counterforce, a disparate group of individuals who, recognizing the pervasive influence of the system and its drive towards control and destruction, attempt to resist it. This counterforce is not a unified organization, but rather a collection of marginalized figures, rebels, and idealists, including some familiar faces like Roger Mexico and Catch Borgesius, who seek to disrupt the prevailing order. Their efforts, however, are often doomed to failure, or worse, are absorbed and neutralized by the very system they seek to oppose. This illustrates one of the novel's most pessimistic insights, that true resistance may be impossible, that even the most well-intentioned acts of defiance can be co-opted and turned into instruments of the system. The counterforce's struggle is a poignant commentary on the human desire for liberation in the face of overwhelming, seemingly omnipotent power, and the profound difficulty of escaping its pervasive reach. Their acts of rebellion are often small, personal, and symbolic, rather than grand, sweeping gestures, highlighting the futility of confronting a force so vast and diffuse. Pynchon continues to employ anachronisms and historical distortions, blurring the lines between past, present, and future. Characters from different historical periods, or even different Pynchon novels, might briefly appear, creating a sense of a timeless, interconnected conspiracy. This deliberate temporal disjunction further disorients the reader, reflecting the character's own fractured sense of time and reality in the chaotic aftermath of the war. The novel suggests that history is not a linear progression, but a complex, cyclical tapestry with patterns and repetitions that span centuries. The colonial atrocities of the past, particularly the German genocide of the hero people, are shown to have a direct lineage to the technological and ethical failings of the present, suggesting that the drive for control and destruction is a recurring pattern in human history, merely manifesting in new, more technologically advanced forms. The V2 rocket, in this context, is not just a modern weapon, but the latest iteration of a long history of human beings developing tools for domination and extermination. The philosophical underpinnings of the novel become even more explicit, particularly the tension between determinism and randomness. Pointsman the behaviorist, represents the deterministic viewpoint, believing that all human behavior can be predicted and controlled through scientific principles, reducing individuals to predictable responses to stimuli. Roger Mexico, the statistician, champions the forces of randomness and probability, arguing that true unpredictability exists and is essential to human freedom. This ongoing intellectual battle between the two men reflects a larger societal debate about the nature of free will in an increasingly technological and systematized world. The V-2 rocket, with its seemingly inevitable trajectory, becomes a powerful symbol for this debate. Is its path truly predetermined? Or are there subtle, unpredictable forces at play that could alter its course? Slothrop, caught in the middle of this philosophical tug of war, becomes a living embodiment of the conundrum. His very existence a challenge to both viewpoints, or perhaps a terrifying confirmation of one. The narrative frequently returns to the image of the scream, the sound of the V-2 breaking the sound barrier, arriving after the impact, a terrifying symbol of an event whose cause precedes its effect, defying conventional causality. This inversion of cause and effect further destabilizes the reader's sense of reality and highlights the novel's engagement with the limits of human perception and understanding. The scream is not just a physical phenomenon, but a psychological one, representing the collective trauma and anxiety of a world irrevocably altered by the silent, unseen terror of advanced weaponry. It is a primal scream that echoes through the novel, a constant reminder of the unseen forces that control human destiny and the fundamental inability to truly comprehend the mechanisms of power that govern existence. This feeling of being constantly subject to unseen forces, of being unable to grasp the full extent of the conspiracy, is what drives Slothrop's escalating paranoia as he sees them everywhere, their presence manifested in every coincidence, every pattern, every turn of events. Slothrop's ultimate fate begins to crystallize as a dispersion, a scattering across the zone, his identity dissolving into the very fabric of the landscape. He is less a cohesive character and more a collection of memories, impulses, and conditioned responses. His various disguises and adopted identities become less about evasion and more about a fundamental inability to maintain a singular self. He becomes a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the wind, a preterite figure consumed by the very forces he sought to understand. The novel's structure mirrors this fragmentation, becoming increasingly episodic, non-linear, and dense with tangential narratives, reflecting Slothrop's disintegrating perception of reality. He becomes a living, breathing symbol of the human cost of unchecked technological advancement and the insidious nature of power. A man whose unique connection to the rocket ultimately leads not to enlightenment, but to a profound, terrifying dissolution. His journey through the zone becomes a metaphorical descent into the unconscious, a final, desperate search for meaning in a world that has ceased to provide any, leaving him forever drifting on the currents of probability and paranoia. As Slothrop's dispersion accelerates, the narrative expands its reach, pulling in disparate characters and storylines into an increasingly complex, almost overwhelming tapestry. We delve deeper into the lives of those on the fringes, the preterite, and their often futile attempts to either resist or simply survive the all-encompassing system. One such significant digression introduces us to Pointsman's nemesis, the psychologist cum occultist, Dr. Edward Pointsman's intellectual rival, and a character who embodies the novel's embrace of the irrational and the mystical. This figure, often engaged in bizarre experiments and rituals, represents a deliberate rejection of the cold, mechanistic worldview of behaviorism. His theories, though often obscure, hint at a deeper, more profound understanding of the human psyche, one that acknowledges the existence of unseen forces and the power of the unconscious. Their intellectual sparring underscores the novel's broader debate between scientific determinism and the forces of chance and magic, suggesting that reality itself is a battleground between these opposing philosophical paradigms. The elusive rocket 00000, destined to carry Gottfried as its human payload, becomes the focal point of a terrifying convergence of desires and ambitions. Bleisrow, the enigmatic and sadistic former SS officer, views this rocket not merely as a weapon, but as a final, perverse act of transcendence, a ritualistic sacrifice to a cosmic void. His detailed, chilling preparations for Gottfried's launch highlight the profound depths of his nihilism and his twisted spiritual understanding of technology. For Bleisrow, the rocket is the ultimate expression of human will, a means of breaking free from earthly constraints and ascending into an indifferent, unfeeling cosmos. The descriptions of this final, horrifying launch are imbued with a sense of both the sacred and the profane, a macabre ballet of engineering precision and spiritual depravity. It is a moment of ultimate control, where the power of the rocket is fully realized, not just as a destructive force, but as an instrument of ultimate human manipulation and sacrifice, intertwined with the immediate threat of rocket 00000 is the ongoing mystery of the Schwarzschild, the black device within it. Rumors surrounding its composition, particularly its connection to Amipolex G and Slothrop's childhood conditioning, continue to haunt the narrative. The Schwarzschild evolves from a mere technological component into a potent symbol of ultimate knowledge, a hidden truth that everyone in the zone seeks to uncover or control. Its nature remains deliberately ambiguous, shifting between a material object and an abstract concept, suggesting that the ultimate secrets of the universe might be beyond human comprehension, or perhaps too dangerous to fully grasp. The pursuit of the Schwarzschild by various factions, including the remaining members of the Schwarz Commando, who desperately seek to salvage it for their own purposes, further amplifies the sense of a grand, global conspiracy, where every action is driven by a hidden agenda, and every individual is a pawn in a larger, unseen game. Pynchon continues to explore the idea of patterns and connections that permeate the seemingly random events of the novel. Coincidences are rarely accidental. They are often revealed to be the subtle manifestations of the underlying system, the invisible threads that bind disparate elements together. This emphasis on patterns reflects the human mind's innate desire to find order in chaos, even when that order is a terrifying conspiracy. Slothrop's journey, in particular, is a search for these patterns, a desperate attempt to discern the logic behind the forces that have shaped his life. However, the more patterns he uncovers, the more deeply he becomes enmeshed in the very conspiracy he seeks to understand, ultimately leading to his dissolution rather than enlightenment. The novel suggests that while patterns exist, understanding them does not necessarily lead to freedom. It can, in fact, lead to greater enslavement. The narrative also dives into the cultural and historical detritus of post-war Europe, incorporating elements of popular songs, films, scientific theories, and historical anecdotes. This encyclopedic approach creates a rich, textured world, but also reinforces the sense of overwhelming information, mirroring the character's struggle to process the vast changes unleashed by the war. The anachronisms and fantastical elements, such as sentient light bulbs or characters who can communicate with the dead further, blur the line between reality and hallucination, contributing to the novel's dreamlike, often nightmarish, atmosphere. Pynchon's prose itself becomes a reflection of this chaotic landscape, shifting between highly technical scientific jargon, lyrical passages of great beauty, and moments of crude humor or satirical parody. This linguistic fluidity forces the reader to constantly adjust, mirroring the disorientation experienced by the characters navigating a world where meaning is constantly dissolving. The concept of the preterite, those passed over, forgotten, or intentionally ignored by the forces of power, continues to be a central thematic concern. Slothrop, in his increasing fragmentation, becomes the ultimate preterite, his identity dissolving into the collective unconscious, his story lost to official histories. The novel celebrates these marginalized figures, giving voice to those whose experiences are often erased by the grand narratives of power and progress. Their struggles, their suffering, and their small acts of defiance become a counterpoint to the monolithic power of the system. The novel suggests that while the elect may control the levers of power, true humanity, true freedom, might reside in the forgotten spaces, among those who exist outside the gaze of the controllers. However, this freedom comes at a cost, often leading to profound loneliness, madness, and ultimate erasure. Slothrop's fate is a tragic testament to this, as he gradually fades from the narrative, a victim of both the external forces that manipulated him and his own internal dissolution. The final culmination of the rocket 00000 launch, with Gottfried as its human payload, is a moment of profound horror and symbolic weight. It represents the ultimate triumph of the death drive, the apotheosis of technological destruction, and the chilling realization that humanity's ingenuity can be turned against itself in the most perverse ways imaginable. This sacrifice is not just a personal tragedy, but a cosmic one, an offering to the forces of entropy and chaos. The novel suggests that this act is not an isolated event, but a culmination of historical processes, a logical endpoint of a civilization obsessed with control and destruction. The silence after the launch, the absence of the scream, is perhaps the most terrifying sound of all, signifying a new kind of terror, one that transcends human comprehension and leaves behind only an echoing void. Slothrop, if he is still truly Slothrop at this point, remains adrift in this terrifying aftermath, a phantom navigating the ruins of a world irrevocably changed by the trajectory of a rocket. forever marked by the invisible forces that orchestrated its flight and his own peculiar, predetermined existence. His final moments within the narrative are elusive, a testament to his complete dissolution, leaving the reader with the lingering question of whether he ever truly existed as a coherent entity, or was merely a fleeting projection of the system's grand, destructive design. As Slothrop's identity dissipates and the narrative spirals towards its enigmatic conclusion, the focus broadens, pulling in disparate characters and storylines into an increasingly complex, almost overwhelming tapestry of events and philosophical musings. The psychological and spiritual aftermath of the war takes center stage, particularly the lingering trauma associated with the V-2 rocket. The launch of Rocket 00000, with Gottfried as its horrifying human sacrifice, doesn't merely recede into history. It becomes a traumatic core, a spiritual wound around which many subsequent actions and characters revolve. This single act is presented not just as a historical detail, but as a profound, unholy transcendence, a perverse testament to humanity's technological prowess turned inward upon itself. The rocket, in its ascent and inevitable fall, embodies a death drive inherent in Western civilization, a relentless, self-destructive pursuit of its own annihilation. The zero of the rocket's serial number, 00000, becomes a potent symbol of ultimate nothingness, of a universe stripped of meaning, a terrifying absence that both attracts and repels, signifying a return to primordial chaos, a void at the heart of all meticulously constructed systems. Slothrop's fragmentation is now utterly pronounced, moving beyond mere psychological deterioration into a profound, almost mystical dissolution. He is no longer a coherent, identifiable character with clear motivations or a stable presence. Instead, he exists as a collection of shifting identities, fleeting appearances, and enigmatic rumors circulating through the vast, lawless expanse of the zone. He is seen wearing a pig costume, embodying the absurdist humor and underlying critique of human nature prevalent throughout the novel. He plays a kazoo, a simple, almost childlike instrument that stands in stark contrast to the complex, terrifying technology of the rockets. He is observed as a spectral presence, a whisper in the wind, a figure more felt than seen. This deliberate dissolution of the protagonist challenges traditional narrative conventions, forcing the reader to confront the possibility that in a world dominated by vast, impersonal systems, the individual can no longer maintain a stable, autonomous self. Slothrop becomes a living intersection, a dynamic point where various trajectories of power, information, desire, and control converge and then diverge. His ultimate fate is left deliberately ambiguous, hinting at a complete dispersal into the very fabric of the landscape, a transformation into something less human and more elemental, a ghost in the vast, entropic machinery of the post-war world. He becomes the preterite par excellence, a person utterly erased from official history. His story, a cautionary tale of the individual consumed by forces beyond comprehension, rendered invisible by the very scrutiny he endured. The imagery of the V-2 rocket, particularly Rocket 00000, and its horrific human payload, Gottfried, continues to resonate as the ultimate symbol of the system's destructive power its perverse desire for transcendence. The rocket's trajectory, initially a subject of purely scientific or military inquiry, is now transformed into a spiritual arc, a chilling parabola that connects the earthly realm to a terrifying, indifferent cosmic void. The scream of the rocket, arriving after its impact, remains a potent metaphor for a world where cause and effect are inverted, where consequences precede actions, and where human perception is constantly undermined by forces beyond its grasp. This inversion is not just a scientific curiosity. It is a fundamental disruption of the human understanding of time and causality, leaving characters and readers alike in a state of profound disorientation and existential dread. The silence that follows the final rocket's launch is not one of peace or resolution, but of a chilling vacuum, an absence of meaning where human purpose once resided, a terrifying testament to the ultimate triumph of the inanimate over the animate. The novel structure itself becomes a direct reflection of this dissolution and fragmentation. The narrative becomes increasingly non-linear, episodic, and recursive, cycling back to certain themes, characters, and motifs without providing definitive answers or conventional closure. The reader is actively thrust into a position mirroring Slothrop's own, forced to piece together disparate clues, to discern patterns amidst overwhelming noise and information overload, and to grapple with ambiguity without the comforting certainty of clear resolution. This deliberate narrative strategy forces active engagement, challenging the reader to confront the very nature of storytelling, the limitations of imposing coherent order on a chaotic world, and the inherent subjectivity of truth. The interspersed songs, poems, scientific explanations, historical digressions, and fantastical interludes serve not to clarify, but to deepen the sense of a world so vast, complex, and interconnected that no single narrative, no single explanation can possibly contain it all. The concept of preterition, the theological and philosophical state of being overlooked, passed over, or intentionally ignored by the forces of power, reaches its unsettling zenith. Gravity's rainbow fundamentally gives voice to the countless nameless victims of history, the marginalized, the forgotten, whose stories are never recorded in official accounts, whose suffering is deemed insignificant by the grand narratives of progress. Slothrop, as he dissipates, becomes the ultimate preterite, his story intentionally erased or absorbed by the very system that sought to control him. The novel argues that true freedom might ironically only exist in this state of forgottenness, outside the scrutinizing gaze of the controllers, but at the profound cost of one's own existence and historical record. The contrast with the elect, those chosen and empowered by the system, becomes stark. While the elect wield power and shape history, their actions are often driven by a chillingly rational, yet ultimately destructive, logic that benefits only themselves. The preterite, in their very anonymity and forgottenness, might paradoxically possess a unique form of resistance, a refusal to be categorized, quantified, and controlled, even if that resistance ultimately leads to their complete disappearance from the historical record. The various groups and individuals who constitute the counterforce continue their often futile, yet profoundly poignant, struggle against the overwhelming reach of the system. Their efforts are typically small-scale, symbolic, and ultimately absorbed or neutralized by the very power they oppose. This outcome reinforces the novel's pervasive pessimism regarding the possibility of true, effective resistance against such an all-encompassing and adaptable force. Yet, in their very acts of defiance, no matter how small, disorganized, or doomed, they embody a sliver of enduring human agency, a testament to the persistent desire for freedom, connection, and rebellion even in the face of overwhelming odds. Their stories, often tragic and unfulfilled, serve as a poignant reminder that the human spirit, even when fragmented and dehumanized, yearns for meaning and authentic connection in a world actively seeking to deny it. The final segments of the novel are marked by a profound sense of apocalyptic dread, not just of a physical end, but of a spiritual and existential one. The war and the technology it unleashed has fundamentally altered the human soul, creating a new kind of post-human existence defined by pervasive anxiety, fragmentation, and a deep inability to connect authentically with others or with a coherent reality. The characters, stripped of their illusions and their sense of agency, are left to navigate a world that has become a desolate wasteland, both physically and spiritually. The question of survival becomes less about physical endurance and more about maintaining one's humanity, one's very essence, in the face of overwhelming dehumanization. Slothrop's ultimate fate, his complete dissolution, serves as a chilling prophecy of what might happen to individuals who truly fall outside the system's control. They simply cease to exist, their stories absorbed into the vast, indifferent expanse of data and noise, leaving only an echo in the collective unconscious, a spectral warning of the system's ultimate power. The culminating sections of Gravity's Rainbow do not offer conventional narrative resolution, but rather a profound dissolution, a scattering of threads that mirror Slothrop's own irreversible fragmentation. The narrative, by this point, has largely abandoned any pretense of linear progression, spiraling instead into a kaleidoscopic montage of images, voices, and philosophical musings, reflecting the ultimate triumph of entropy and the unmaking of a coherent reality. The sense of a grand conspiracy, initially a source of paranoia, transforms into something far more insidious and ubiquitous, the pervasive, all-encompassing system that has absorbed all opposition, all individuality, leaving behind only the cold, impersonal logic of its own self-perpetuation. This system is not confined to any single nation or ideology. It is a global phenomenon, a network of corporate power, scientific advancement, and bureaucratic control that transcends human morality and seeks to reduce all existence to predictable data points. The ultimate fate of Slothrop is left profoundly ambiguous, a deliberate choice by Pynchon to underscore the novel's themes of erasure and the preterite. He does not achieve a grand revelation or a dramatic escape. Instead, he simply dissipates, his identity dissolving into the very landscape of the zone, his story becoming a whisper, a rumor, a scattered collection of unverified sightings. He is seen wearing a pig mask, playing a kazoo, or existing as a ghost, a presence that is more felt than seen. This final act of dispersion can be interpreted in multiple ways as the tragic consequence of his being caught in the system's machinery. his individual self completely consumed, or perhaps more optimistically, as a form of liberation, a shedding of the false, conditioned identity imposed upon him, allowing him to merge with the collective unconscious, to become truly free by becoming nothing. He transcends the very concepts of subject and object, becoming an integral part of the chaotic, entropic universe itself, no longer bound by the categories of the elect. The imagery of the V2 rocket, particularly rocket 00000, and its horrific human payload, Gottfried, continues to resonate as the ultimate symbol of the system's destructive power and its perverse desire for transcendence. The rocket's trajectory, initially a subject of scientific inquiry, is transformed into a spiritual arc, a parabola that connects the earthly realm to a terrifying, indifferent void. The scream of the rocket, arriving after its impact, remains a potent metaphor for a world where cause and effect are inverted, where consequences precede actions, and where human perception is constantly undermined by forces beyond its grasp. This inversion is not just a scientific curiosity. It is a fundamental disruption of the human understanding of time and causality, leaving characters and readers alike in a state of profound disorientation and existential dread. The silence that follows the final rocket's launch is not one of peace, but of a chilling vacuum, an absence of meaning where human purpose once resided. The novel's structure itself becomes a reflection of this dissolution. The narrative becomes increasingly non-linear, fragmented, and recursive, cycling back to certain themes and characters without providing definitive answers. The reader is thrust into a position mirroring Slothrop's own, forced to piece together disparate clues, to discern patterns amidst overwhelming noise, and to grapple with ambiguity without the comfort of clear resolution. This deliberate narrative strategy forces active engagement, challenging the reader to confront the very nature of storytelling and the limitations of imposing order on a chaotic world. The interspersed songs, poems, scientific explanations, and historical digressions serve not to clarify, but to deepen the sense of a world so vast and complex that no single narrative can contain it. The concept of preterition, the state of being overlooked or passed over, reaches its zenith. Gravity's rainbow gives voice to the countless nameless victims of history, the marginalized, the forgotten, whose stories are never recorded in official accounts. Slothrop, as he dissipates, becomes the ultimate preterite, his story intentionally erased by the system that sought to control him. The novel argues that true freedom might only exist in this state of forgottenness, outside the gaze of the controllers, but at the cost of one's own existence. The contrast with the elect, those chosen and empowered by the system, becomes stark. While the elect wield power and shape history, their actions are often driven by a chillingly rational, yet ultimately destructive, logic. The preterite, in their very anonymity, might possess a unique form of resistance, a refusal to be categorized and controlled, even if that resistance leads to their ultimate disappearance. The various groups and individuals who constitute the counterforce continue their futile, yet poignant, struggle against the system. Their efforts are often small, symbolic, and ultimately absorbed by the very power they oppose. This reinforces the novel's pessimistic outlook on the possibility of true, effective resistance against such an all-encompassing force. Yet, in their very acts of defiance, no matter how small or doomed, they embody a sliver of human agency, a testament to the enduring desire for freedom and rebellion even in the face of overwhelming odds. Their stories, often tragic and unfulfilled, serve as a reminder that the human spirit, even when fragmented, yearns for connection and meaning in a world actively seeking to deny it. Ultimately, Gravity's Rainbow concludes not with an explosion, but with a descent. The novel circles back to the image of a theater, where the audience, which can be interpreted as the reader, is watching a film. The final lines of the novel present a direct address, inviting the reader to sing along to a song as a bomb falls. A final, chilling convergence of art, destruction, and human complicity. This ambiguous ending suggests that the cycle of destruction is ongoing, that the rocket continues to fall, and that humanity is perpetually caught in its trajectory. The war may be over, but its lessons remain unlearned. Its technologies continue to proliferate, and the forces of control continue to tighten their grip. The novel leaves the reader suspended in this unsettling moment, grappling with the lingering questions of fate, free will, and the terrifying legacy of unchecked technological power, forever echoing with the scream that precedes the impact, a sound that warns of a future that has already arrived. Gravity's Rainbow stands as a monumental achievement in postmodern literature, a challenging and rewarding journey into the heart of 20th century anxieties. Thomas Pynchon's sprawling, kaleidoscopic narrative dissects the insidious nature of power, the dehumanizing effects of technology, and the enduring human struggle for meaning and agency in a world seemingly hurtling towards its own destruction. More than just a war novel, it is a profound meditation on causality, randomness, and the terrifying possibility that our lives are merely trajectories in a vast, predetermined system. Its impact lies not in offering easy answers, but in forcing readers to confront the uncomfortable truths about control, complicity, and the often invisible forces that shape our destinies. It remains a work of immense intellectual and emotional power, a prophetic vision of a world forever scarred by the trajectory of the rocket, and a timeless reminder that the line between order and chaos, freedom and control, is perpetually blurred, leaving us forever suspended between the arc of a rainbow and the terrifying reality of its fall.